I literally call it AA and BA, before ayahuasca and after ayahuasca, because, she woke me up to possibilities. Before I met ayahuasca, I was just really in a space of self-loathing and self-destruction. I was a kind of a functioning alcoholic and bulimic and just really on a path of being very unkind to myself. And so when I met ayahuasca 20 years ago, of course, she didn't fix me. It's not like that. What she did is, for the first time in my life, I felt that it was possible for me to heal and be happy. Well, ayahuasca will always be in my number one because she basically saved my life. She's tough to kind of pin down because I've been working with her for 20 years and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface in terms of what she has to offer, because it feels like she's always 10 steps ahead.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to our podcast, Ayahuasca Avatars. And today I'm here with Kat Courtney from the Plant Medicine People. And yeah, it's amazing opportunity for you guys to hear some good wisdom to be shared, from somebody who is on this path for like 2 decades or even more than that. So stay with us, and thank you, Kat, for coming today.
Oh, Nina, thank you for having me, for that setup. Let's see if we can bring some wisdom.
Yes, you had a book. It was recently published, or when was your book published?
About a year and a half ago.
Okay, so yeah, wonderful. What's the name of the book?
It's called The Plant Medicine Mystery School, and it is volume one. I am working on volume two. So, volume one, the subtitle is The Superhero Healing Powers of Psychotropic Plants.
Absolutely. And you can, I think I got it on Kindle, but I'm sure you know that other platforms, people can get your book as well. And I really recommend this book, guys, to read. I'm going to write a review about it in my blog, but it's really, really good information. And I wish I would have had something like that to read, before I started my journey on the plant medicine path. So yeah, we're going to go into some of the topics that Kat is talking about in the book. And this is how we connected, or this is how I got to know you or know about you, that I came across of your book, because I'm always looking out, what people are putting out there. And I don't know, something just resonated with me, and I started reading it and really pulled me in. And I often find this with people who are on the plant medicine path, and we cross paths, that there is one truth, there is one wisdom, and we're learning the same thing, and it's such a nice affirmation on my path in particular, when I hear other people, oh, they learn the same thing, like that we learn, especially, people who work with similar plants, and their specific teachings, from the plants, and it's nice affirmation that you are on the right path, because it's really about the same thing. And so we're going to talk about all of that. But before we dive in, just, if people want to get to know you a little bit, they can read the book. But what I really want to know is that how did the plant change your life? Like, what will you say was for you the biggest, okay, this was kind of my life before, this is how I used to think or live or behave or whatever, and then something happened and I got some new information, and thanks to that, my life's changed, in some way. Because I think that's one of the big questions that people want to know, is like, what exactly we're talking about is like breakthrough results and life changing. And so how was that for you, like personally, this experience?
Yeah, great question. For me, it was the actual experience of meeting ayahuasca the first time. I literally call it AA and BA, before ayahuasca and after ayahuasca, because, she woke me up to possibilities. Before I met ayahuasca, I was just really in a space of self-loathing and self-destruction. I was a kind of a functioning alcoholic and bulimic and just really on a path of being very unkind to myself. And so when I met ayahuasca 20 years ago, of course, she didn't fix me. It's not like that. What she did is, for the first time in my life, I felt that it was possible for me to heal and be happy. And I had never felt that before, because I had been diagnosed bipolar. I had been told, your brain is broken. Good luck, basically. Nobody gave me any hope. And when I met ayahuasca, I knew I had a long journey ahead and I'm still on that journey, but it was like, oh, why not me? Of course, I can find my way to a more stable, happy place. So she changed everything just by giving me the spark of possibility. And that's what made me just fall in love with her and say, I'm all in. How do I make this my path?
Wow, that's pretty impressive. I remember my experience, my first dieta in Peru, it was quite not what I expected. It was very difficult. It was pretty dark and heavy and I wanted to quit halfway through, and I definitely at that time at the beginning I didn't really understand what is this all about and what does this all mean, I was a little bit confusing to me, and later I got more understanding and clarity. But yeah, it's nice to hear that you had such a different experience. Like in your book you're talking about that the sacred plants and plants in general, but sacred plants in particular are our greatest teachers and doctors. Can you talk a little bit about this? Why do you think that? Like, what was your experience?
Yeah, my experience with the plants is that they don't have these complicated egos that all of us humans have. And the egos are complicated because they create an experience of separateness that feels really real and identity. And the plants, although, a lavender plant and an ayahuasca plant each have their own sort of personality and spirit, they're in unity consciousness. They don't forget that everything's interconnected. They don't have this sort of suffering around thinking they're separate the way that we do. So that's why I trust the plants to be my direct mirrors and my teachers more than even the mentors that I've had in my life, amazing human beings, simply because they don't have the shadow that we have. They're mirrors. That's how I experience them. And so I trust that their agenda is always about our healing and the truth. Whereas human beings, we have a lot of different agendas, don't we? Whether we're coming from head or heart, and it's more complicated. So my best friends, my mentors are more plants than people, simply because I trust the vibration of that energy more.
Wow, that is so fascinating. And I can imagine how does this sound to somebody who is not into this world at all. Like,
True.
and that was also one of my questions. So let's talk about this, like, because even as people who are into spirituality, they hear about, okay, there is like unity consciousness and there is separation and duality, and we have some kind of understanding of these words. And you also, talk about this in your book. So what does it mean that we are in duality? We are in a state of separation. What does it mean to be in unity consciousness? Why is that important for us to understand this? How can our life be different if we would really understand what does this mean? Because I think that's where most people are. Like, maybe they heard the words, but
Yeah, well, and I was that person not that long ago. So that's such a great question. I think it's important that we understand what duality means simply because that's what we live in. And what the plants like ayahuasca have taught me is that duality, unity, is there a triality out there? Why not? These are just portals of consciousness, dimensions, if you will. And so our base level, what we all experience every day is duality. How do we know that? Because everywhere we look, there's contrast. So to learn more about what hot feels like, we have to learn more about what cold feels like, right? We can't have one without the other because we're in duality and it's full of contrast. But working with the plants, we start to realize, wait, duality isn't the only state of consciousness. There are other states. That's why I'm like triality, quadrality. Why not, right? It seems like consciousness is limitless, but what we're in 99.999% of the time is duality. And we even have it all over the place in our language, head and heart, masculine and feminine. Like everything has a partner in balance because that's the nature of our base level consciousness. But it turns out there are other things besides duality, other portals into consciousness. And that's part of what I think a lot of us are intrigued by in our spiritual journeys when we work with the plants is like, ooh, my literally, we call it altered consciousness, right? They can change the way we see and experience the world. And so it's just important to understand the baseline and then that other things are possible.
Right. So, okay. So I think people can understand this, and you explained it in such a good way. Obviously, everybody can see and experience the contrast and how our way of thinking is within this frame. So, for somebody who never had a psychedelic experience before, because I was just in this situation the other day, this person was trying to understand what does that mean, to be in an expanded state of consciousness, or in a like a unity state or something. And I was like, I don't think I can explain. So how could you the best explain to people what is that unity consciousness, or how does it feel like, and what, like, you having this experience, how does that informs your life here in now?
Beautiful. Well, first of all, we can talk about altered states of consciousness, I think, in a way that is universal, or at least close to it. What about falling in love, the portal of love, right? That's not a mental duality experience. That's an altered state of, oh my God, I've got goosebumps just feeling what that feels like. Or like women who have given birth, that is a portal of a different state of consciousness, bringing in life. So there are things that are more universal in our human language that we can go, oh yeah, my consciousness was different. Let's just call it different. Having gone through an experience of falling in love, or going through a really intense journey of crisis, or a car accident where we go into a state of shock. These are altered states of consciousness. So when we take plants, we're doing that proactively, and they each have their different sort of flavor of what that feels like. But that can give people more context of, oh, that's an expanded state of consciousness. And the way that it informs our lives, just like all of the things that I just mentioned, falling in love, giving birth, it kind of changes everything, because we start to realize other things are possible outside of what we experience all day, every day. It's an expanded state. So we start to sometimes question, well, what else is possible? What else can I experience if I can fall in love? Cool. And that's such a force. Like, what else does consciousness have for me outside of, the normal, the mundane? So it can kind of change everything in how we walk in the world.
Right. So can you give like examples? Because like as somebody was asking me, this question that, how does that, like, how do you behave like differently, for example, in your daily life or in your relationships, that you have this kind of experiences and this informs your way of being in the world? Like, can you pinpoint some examples that would be different than normally what people would do?
Sure. Well, I'll take it from a personal lens. I mentioned drinking ayahuasca the first time gave me that hope of, wait, I could heal. So when I went home from that first trip to the jungle, I changed my lens that was previously programmed of, well, I just have to handle this because I'll never get better. And instead was like, how can I get better? What does that look like? And then, I started finding things like meditation and a teacher on a spiritual path that gave me different tools. If I hadn't had that lens change, I wouldn't have looked for things that were different. The way that I illustrate this to people that are new in this regard is I'll ask people to say, look around the room right now and look at everything that is blue. Okay, got it. Now close your eyes and tell me everything that was red. You weren't looking for it, so it's probably unlikely you can name more than one thing that was red. You were looking for the things that were blue. So when we have expanded states of consciousness, it can change how we're looking at the world. So I went from looking at basically how to survive to how do I thrive? I can thrive. But I needed a change in consciousness to give me the realization that that was possible.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. Absolutely. So, like a shift in perspective, we literally changing our minds. Michael Pollan's famous book, how to change changing our minds, our belief systems, like how we look at the world, and that obviously informs our behavior is going to be different based on that new way of thinking, that new perception, new point of view, right? So, and that changes everything. That will change your experience like completely. So I know that you work with so many plants, and I have experience with other plants as well, apart from the ayahuasca, but not to the extent as yourself. And I know that each plants are different, and unique, and it's this, there's no better or worse or some kind of, people want to have a hierarchy of plants. It's like, but can you talk a little bit about the ayahuasca? What would be the unique characteristics from based on your experience, and you have other experiences as well with different plants?
Yeah, well, ayahuasca will always be in my number one because she basically saved my life. And she's kind of one of the most difficult ones to talk about just because her spectrum of consciousness, and I know it's weird to even say she, because a lot of people are like, does a plant have a gender? In my experience, she does. If somebody said ayahuasca feels masculine to me, they're right too. Like the plants can be duplicitous or multifaceted in that way, but to me, it's very feminine. And she's tough to kind of pin down because I've been working with her for 20 years and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface in terms of what she has to offer, because it feels like she's always 10 steps ahead of my mind. No matter how much my consciousness expands, she's way ahead. And so I'm very humbled by just the depth of wisdom and ancientness that she carries. But she feels divinely feminine, incredibly maternal. We typically reference her as either mama or grandmother energy, because she's to me, she's the example of the best mom ever, because she teaches. She doesn't do things for us. She shows us things and gives us the tools and the camaraderie, like, you can do it. She didn't heal me. She's taught me every step of the way how to heal myself, how to stand responsible for my own journey. And so I consider that the best mom ever, because that's what moms do. We give tools and we inform, but we can't do it for our kids. And so that's the essence of what ayahuasca feels like to me, is that she's like a mom to the entire world of humanity, that she's just trying to help us to heal, because as we heal, then we're nicer to each other and we're nicer to the planet, and it's just kind of a win-win. So that's the general way to describe her.
Well, thank you. We're gonna keep diving in for sure, but yeah, like it's so magical, and this is something that occurred to me. I'm curious to know your point of view, that I was wondering why there is this calling with the ayahuasca, that I'm sure with other plants have this to a certain extent, but not the so characteristics like the ayahuasca, and it's calling people and everything. And I was thinking, why is that? And me being a therapist for over 25 years, first a psychologist and then alternative therapy and then plant medicine, like it's really, I was thinking that a lot of the trauma is around the mother wound, or connection with our mother, the female lineage, and all that kind of stuff. So there is a lot of damage there. Not that there is no damage on the masculine side. So that was something that occurred to me, that maybe that's why she's so central right now in this big collective healing or something. Like, do you have like any perspective on why she's one of the most popular and a lot of people feel called to specifically work with this plant?
It's really fascinating, Nina, because I got to be honest, I didn't see that coming 20 years ago, because she's not easy to work with, right? Like, she's got incredible like gifts and the rewards are limitless, but this is not a medicine that is fun times in altered spaces. It's really, you work with her. So it has surprised me over the years to see everybody and their grandma wants to drink ayahuasca. This is amazing. What I sense, partly absolutely what you shared around the mother wounding, needing to feel nurtured and held the way that she does, is a big piece of it. And also this capacity that she has to illuminate our shadow, the parts of ourselves. Like, I like to joke that if you have a box inside you that says, do not look here, ayahuasca is going to find it. And with great glee, crack that open, because she knows that what's hiding in there is what's holding us back. And so, because I think we're in a global experience of shadow and the awakening that comes with that, she's the medicine that is there to support us in seeing the parts of ourselves that are wounded and traumatized and scared, and bringing them into the light. So I think she just matches what's happening in the collective, and it just happens to be her time, which is amazing.
That I literally have like goosebumps goosebumps, when you were like talking about this, like that totally makes sense for me. And my personal journey with this medicine was like that, after many years of work, I could access memories who were suppressed into amnesia about childhood trauma. That was the root of the problems that I struggle with my whole life. And I really feel that for me, this medicine, she helps to uproot things, like she helps to go into, as you said, at depth. And why is this important? I think it's because you can't heal what you don't know, like you are not aware of. You have a problem, you cannot do anything about it. Like oftentimes we see the consequences of problem, playing out in our life, but we do not see the real causes. We might have ideas, what causing it, but normally we don't know the real cause of the problem. And I think that she is very powerful ally to help us to go into that depth, that could be very, very difficult to access. And that's what brought me to the medicine, that I tried all the alternative tools, all the like psychology, everything. Like I tried them all that I could, and that didn't help me, didn't bring me. It helped somewhat, but it didn't help to resolve the problem. So for me, I feel like that she's a little bit like a shortcut. Let's just save time. Here it is. Let's look at it. Like how do you feel about that aspect?
That's it. That's exactly what she does. Because she's so intense, it's like a faster journey into the subconscious. But I feel like with that comes some responsibility of knowing how to handle that intensity, because it is a shortcut. Essentially, we still have to do the work, but her capacity to illuminate things that I could have sat in my therapist's office for another 20 years and got like one pixel of what she gives me, just because it's a different path. It leads to the same place, but she's turbo.
Yes, definitely not for the faint-hearted. It's always say like warrior path, but also like I work with a lot of people in my practice who's like, I tried everything and I'm the end of my rope, and let's do it, whatever it takes. And oftentimes I attract people who are at that point when they come to the medicine, and they do have really breakthrough results. But of course, not, we're gonna talk about this more, but not just the medicine, but the work that you put in and everything as well. So as you say in your book, and you mentioned it a couple of moments ago, that the medicine doesn't heal us, she helps us to heal. She helps us to see, to access information that we need in order to heal and to remember our power and our innate healing power, and who we are, and all of these things. And this healing process happens through something we call shadow work. And I think this is very typical, especially with the ayahuasca. I'm sure with other medicines also have this aspect, because it's just aspect of the healing work in general. But what is the shadow? What does the shadow work means? How long does it take? Like how what is that or part? We have to do this shadow work, like for people who are interested maybe working with the medicine. Like how can they imagine that work that has to be done outside of a ceremonial container?
Yeah, right. This is important to emphasize, that the ceremony is just one tiny piece of the whole journey of healing and awakening. And so to me, it's all about working with the shadow, because in a very simple way to describe it, the shadow is just what we don't know, right? It's all of the parts of ourselves that aren't yet conscious, which for most of us is the vast majority. But I'm a student of Carl Jung, who is the godfather, right, of giving language to shadow work. And what I always like to remind myself and the people I work with is that shadow work isn't inherently bad news. It's not like just repressed traumas or memories. It's also what Jung called the golden shadow, the potential that we have as human beings, our talents and our gifts and things that are hiding underneath these layers of pain and unconsciousness. And so there's good news waiting in there that we want to know. I mean, I think we want to know all of it, but we usually associate traumas and repressed repressed emotions and things like that with the shadow, which of course that's part of it. But then as you go deeper, then you get to find, wait a second, it turns out I'm an incredible messenger or painter or whatever that might have been hiding in there that we get to find out is true for us too. So shadow work is just self-discovery. And as we discover more about ourselves, we understand more about consciousness as a whole because it's not disconnected. So one of my spiritual teachers used to joke that shadow work is the only game in town. It's what we're all doing. We're becoming more conscious, one bit by bit by bit. And then if you drink ayahuasca, sometimes it's a big bit, but it's still, consciousness as a whole feels limitless. So we're always going to be students of what we don't know.
That's so beautiful how you described it, that basically everybody is doing shadow work all the time, right? Because we are evolving, we are learning. But when you do it with conscious awareness, voluntarily and intentionally, that's what we are talking about, right? With the medicine, especially with this type of medicine, and this other thing you were talking about, this golden shadow. I heard this expression recently, but in the past I never heard about it, but I love it, and I'm just like, oh my God, that was something that you described, at the beginning of the podcast, that how the medicine gave you hope, because before you felt hopeless and in a kind of despair, about your situation, and I can very much relate to that the similar experience that, when I started to work with plants, and even before the plants, healing in outer state with breath work, holotrope breath work and rebirthing and that kind of stuff, like it became clear to me that there is a part of me that there is all powerful, all knowing, all loving, and that nobody talked about that part, right? Even in psychology, is we all focus on the dysfunction. There is a DSM, right? The biggest book about in how many ways you can be fucked up, in the head and in everywhere. Like, so that nobody talks about how incredible we are, how powerful we are, our capacity to overcome, to heal, to remember all of these things. And that was something for me that the plants, taught me, and of course started to help me to connect with those parts of myself, who had these capacities. And I think this is so important, like right now in our world as well, because what is happening around, it's horrible, just we just have to look at the last few years, and we forget about all these good, amazing, magical things, because there's so much darkness, there's so much negativity, there's so much fear, and this is something I want to talk about, the fear, and to heal fear and what is fear, because that was something also that for me personally, the ayahuasca helped me a lot to start to peel off these layers of fear and to start changing my perception and look at things in a little bit different way that hold me in this grip of anxiety for most of my life, and I think, now this is just a general condition that people, I take pills for that, like that's just normal, way of being. So let's talk about a little bit fear, and where's fear come from, and what is fear, and how does this relate to working with the ayahuasca?
Mm-hmm. She loves to illuminate our fears, doesn't she? And by the way, I relate. I've had quite a personal journey with fear. I sometimes joke I have a PhD in fear because, was medicated for anxiety and absolutely went down that road of feeling like that was part of what was broken in me. Is I was just scared and nervous all the time. Didn't know why. Just scared to order a pizza. Like what, none of it makes sense. That's one of the core sort of things about fear, is it's not logical. It's deeply embedded. And so we can't think our way into a space of not being fearful. And that's an important understanding, is we're not doing something wrong because we're scared. We're in a vibration of trauma, and it's just expressing itself. And so one of the things that ayahuasca taught me that is really powerful in understanding it is she once broke it down to me and said, look, it's duality, right? We just established that there's two baselines for where all the other experiences that we have in duality come from. One is fear, the other is love. Fear is resistance. It's an energy of no, I don't trust that. It's a pushing against. Love is an openness. It's an energy of yes, yes, I trust that. So fear is just the parts of ourselves that haven't experienced love, that don't even know that there's anything other than the resistance. And she said that when we're, birthed as a soul, we start in the vibration of fear and we slowly move to be more and more in the vibration of love. And that simplifies it. And like, that makes sense because that's been my journey in this lifetime of like a little bit more and a little bit more, and sometimes a big burst into love, but it's not as if the fear has gone away. I still have a relationship with it. It's still a teacher. There's just less of me saying no and resisting. And it's primal. And that's important too. It's not that it's our fault that we resist and fight. It's primal and deeply programmed. It's from our ancestors and our lineage. It's from the experiences that we've had in this lifetime. And it sure is also a reflection of the world in which we live in, which is very fear-based. So all of us that are healing and that are awakening, we're bit by bit dissolving or alchemizing that fear into love. And that feels very true. Simple in understanding, not simple in how to do it. But that's one of the things that ayahuasca is incredible about, is helping to illuminate the fear, to get us and teach us to work with it differently. For example, fear and excitement are the same physiological response. It's how we relate to it that matters. So something that is like, whoa, that's really scary, it feels the same to the body of, ooh, I'm really excited for that. It's the perspective, back to what we were talking about a bit ago. Perspective is everything. So, bit by bit, what she's taught me is to take this intense vibration that I feel and alchemize it into a, yeah, I'm excited for this, I trust this, versus a, no, not that, and a pushing away, because that's what creates the suffering. So, and I'm very much still a student of this. It's just, pixel by pixel of alchemy. And I'm grateful for her, because I don't know where I'd be had I not found her. I'd be really scared is where I'd be.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I love, that you mentioned this, that, the duality, that the other polarity from fear is love, because I don't think a lot of people make this but for me, that's logical as well. I was wondering, I saw this like diagram about the vibration of different emotions and on a vibrational scale, and the bottom, the lowest vibrational emotion was guilt, actually, not fear, which was interesting to me. But also, I mean, I can see, because it does feel very heavy compared to fear, but I love, that you pointed out that this is too extreme of the spectrum, that unity consciousness of oneness is basically the complete lack of fear, right? And from that on is like more and more degrees of fear, right? Until it's a complete, right? We are completely like immersed in that experience. And I think that for most humans, this fear translates to the fear of death ultimately, right? And this medicine, the wine of the dead, and I think for people are familiar who are working with this medicine, what the death and rebirth process means, literally and figuratively speaking. So I feel, that helped me to lose the fear of the and that, because that was associated so much. Do you think that this has a factor in it as well?
I think it's the biggest factor. And it's the thing we don't like to talk about is death and dying, and the fact that it's happening everywhere all the time. Things are being reborn and dying, figuratively and literally, right? And we're no different. It's just we're pretty afraid of that, because it is an experience of the unknown. So ayahuasca literally means wine of the dead, as you mentioned. And this is obviously one of her favorite things to illuminate in us is look at this, like, what really is death experientially. And she'll show us, and it's impossible to describe until you go through it. But here's what's fascinating about this medicine is she knows the exact recipe that each of us as individuals need to experience in order to think, oh my God, I'm dying. Like, I really am dying. Because I remember 9 years into working with her, I went through a death experience, and I had the part of my consciousness that was like, Kat, this is just the medicine, and you coach people through this all the time. But there was also part of of me going, no, this is real. I'm actually dying. And it felt so real. And even though I knew it's probably just the medicine, but that's how brilliant she is at creating that experience. And I needed it, a death and rebirth to have the next transformation, basically. But death, our relationship with death forms our relationship with life. It's just, they can't be separated, can they? Because we're born and we die, and we get to do that again and again and again in figurative and literal ways. And so if we don't have a conscious relationship with death, then that fear is driving all aspects of our life, whether we're aware of it or not.
So true. Thank you so much. I love what you said, that our relationship with death informs, our relationship with life, and, to get out the grip of this fear so we can really enjoy and thrive and fully receive, because that's what we talked about it earlier, that when you are afraid, you are contracted, you are closed, you cannot receive the full experience, the full spectrum. And yeah, it's a kind of like a predicament. And yeah, also I think she has a vast sense of humor, and like I remember, ceremonies when I was like totally floored, on every possible way, and it was also the most amazing experience. And I was like, you think you're funny? And she's
She
like,
does. She thinks
yeah,
she's always having a blast. She's
I
always like,
am.
this is
Yeah,
great.
yeah, I am funny. Whatever. Like if I'm understanding more the what does the cosmic joke means, right? Like what does that mean? Because I think she loves that, she loves to do that. And definitely, this is something that is amazing, that we can drop into this life experience and deeper experience with more openness, with more trust, to receive, because most of us just like a big ball of like anxiety walking around, I think, at the beginning, and especially like nowadays. So I remember, that coming from psychology and Western medicine and everything, that for me, studying alternative healing already informed a lot, my understanding of healing and disease, in a more holistic way, and understanding what a human being is. But of course, working with the mother ayahuasca, like over the last 12 years, I have to say it totally deepened my understanding of what healing is, what disease is, how disease is being created, how healing is created, like all this kind of stuff. And you shared a little bit about this with your book. So I'm curious, what was your experience and what is your understanding of the dynamics of disease and healing as you understand it?
So one of the important first distinctions she made for me is to understand that healing does not mean cured. And we sometimes try to put the two together as, oh, I need this thing, this discomfort, this disease to go away in order to be healed. And she really confronts that. It's like, sometimes we can be cured and be healed at the same time, but they don't have to go together. So I'll give a personal example. I have severe tinnitus, like it's happening right now, really loud ringing. There are times when I relate to that with the resistance, the I don't like this, and then it's awful. And there are times where I'm like, it's just the sound of creation buzzing in my ears, and it's amazing, and I'm grateful for it. So I am healed when I'm in the state of saying yes, of like, I'm good with this. It's acceptance, it's wholeness. So I've never experienced a cure with that, but I experienced deep healing on the regular. And so that gave me freedom in understanding that in my journey of like, oh, right, it's all about a relationship. Something doesn't have to go away in order for me to be totally good with it. Pain, tinnitus, things like that. And in that state of acceptance, though, we can sometimes find the cure if it's in our dharma, in our highest good. Some things are there for us to actually eradicate. Some things are there for us as teachers, that we're in relationship with them. And that's what ayahuasca teaches is healing is acceptance and wholeness. It isn't necessarily make that go away. And that's kind of a difficult thing for Western minds to gather, because Western medicine is all about, it's allopathic, which means attack the disease, right? Make it go away. And I was like, that's not always healing. So that's an important expansion of understanding it. At least it was for me.
Yeah, I love what you're saying, and I deeply resonate with that. And the other side of this is also that I experience a lot in my practice when people work with the underlying issues, they very often cured from physical disease, mental, emotional, without actually addressing the disease itself, like on a symptomatic level. So I work with people with autoimmune, cancer, and whatever, with ayahuasca assisted therapy, when we will look at that uprooting that we talked about. And most of the cases, curing, like elimination of the symptoms, does occur as a result of that deeper healing. So, like, how do we know when a symptom is there for us to say, hey, you need to work on this, you need to look at this, you need to do something about this because this is the signal, or this is a situation when we need to just accept it and be okay with it and roll with it, and that was it. Like, this is kind of, how do we discern that?
Well, that's such a great question because we don't know really. But I think what ayahuasca teaches is that the acceptance, the relationship with it of like, well, this is here for me. This is a teacher. That has to come first if anything else is going to occur. Because if we just go in guns blazing of make this go away, what she calls that is whack-a-mole. She's like, you might make your headaches go away, but then it's going to spring up in your colon. Or, we're playing whack-a-mole, just trying to eradicate it, when in fact, what the invitation is to do what you're describing, which is to go into the root, which is trauma and pain and programming. So when we go to the root of things and we feel and we release, then we'll find out, right, if something is ready to be cured or if it continues to be a teacher. So for me, most of the things that I had on a physical level have been cured, not because I chased that down, but because I've been willing with her to work through. I have hearing loss and tinnitus. They're still with me. Well, but that's apparently by design, So I continue to do things to go to root causes, but if this stays for the rest of my life, that's okay. That's okay. I haven't failed. I'm not unhealed. I'm just somebody who gets to walk in the world with this as a challenge. So that's where we find out. We don't really know. But if we continue to do the root work and to feel and process, it's awesome no matter what, because we heal in a state of wholeness. It's not conditional that things have to go away. So yay, that's actually really good news.
That is so hilarious, because I know somebody else, like a man who also works with the medicine, also wrote a book about the medicine, very interesting, also has tinnitus, also worked with the medicine for many years, and he came to the very same conclusion.
I love it.
Bizarre knowing too, like
very validating. Yeah. Like, yeah, not everything is a problem to be solved.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. So we're on our own journey
Totally.
determining that, but we don't know until we're in the experience. If something is ready to lift and dissolve, fantastic. If not, that's okay too.
Yeah. And so one part of the healing, I think, especially with the mother ayahuasca, is emotional healing, emotional release. I love your book. You say feeling is healing, and I just love that loud, because I say that to my clients all the time. So can you talk a little bit about the connection between suppressed emotions, trauma, disease, healing, and emotions, emotional expression in general?
Absolutely. I mean, emotions breaks down to energy and motion, right? It's right there. It's so obvious. And yet we do anything possible in our everyday lives, most of us in the Western world, to not feel, to distract ourselves. And look where it gets us. Chronic illness galore, autoimmune issues, depression, like you name it. We're suffering so much. And the answer is the very thing that we keep saying, anything but that. Can I take a pill? Can I just distract myself? And it's not working. And so what ayahuasca teaches is go and feel this stuff. Be with it. Don't, it's kind of the opposite of what we do in the Western world. If we get a stomach ache, we want to take something to make it go away. What ayahuasca says is go into it. Be curious. What is this? What does it need to be felt and released? Because underneath the physical discomfort is an emotional discomfort. And we don't like to be uncomfortable. That's kind of just a trademark hallmark of our culture. And ayahuasca is incredibly uncomfortable on all levels because sitting with that, feeling it, is a form of freedom. It allows the energy to be in motion. So it can actually just dissipate. When we repress it, it builds on itself. And then, after years of repressing something like anger, you can blow up because somebody puts too much mayo in your sandwich and you're like, ah, and it's not about that. It's an invitation to feel all of these things that are stored. And there's always freedom in that. It's not easy to process something like grief. I mean, for me, the first years of sitting with ayahuasca, I just bawled, like intense crying as a purge. And ironically, beautifully, poetically, asthma I had had since childhood went away. My lungs just loosened up. And I wasn't chasing that. I didn't even think that was possible, but it happened somewhere along the way. And I think it's because I was doing grief work. I was making space every time I cried my eyes out. And suddenly I was like, oh my gosh, I could breathe. This is incredible. Like, so there's an example of how magical the willingness to feel and process that, what it can bring us.
Absolutely. I had a great experience. I think in general for women, the most suppressed emotion is anger because of cultural conditioning. And I think for men it's like sadness. And I mean, in general, of course, people
Yeah.
go, oh, not everybody, but there's just like gender specific conditioning and stuff like that. And I had like a huge trip with anger actually that like lasted for 3 years for me, trying to process it and my mind trying to justify why it's okay for feel angry, and getting just higher and higher perspectives and teachings on this. And I remember that the beat that shifted something deeply in me was not even in a ceremony, it was in between ceremonies, because you keep working with the medicine spirit, right? And it was about an understanding how it was almost like seeing this higher perspective when you zoom out, and you see this chain of pain. And it was specifically between men and women and relationships, and how you did this, so now I'm going to do this, and now you did that, and how it was perpetuated for generations and eons. And it was shown to me in this experience. I could see, just the same thing being repeated. And from their perspective, everybody was right, but that wasn't the point. And that I could see from that vantage point that the only way to stop it is that somebody will say that it stops here now, and I will let go and start it again. I will let go of all of this that happened, let it go, because there is no other way, somebody has to do that. And I did that for myself in that moment. And this was specifically related to men, like in my life. And I just did this big ritual of like symbolically and on every level letting go and say, I want to move on. I don't want to carry this energy with me inside of me, in feeling this nasty energy all the time. And it was just gone, from one moment to, like I could not try to figure out for 3 years why I feel so angry. Where is this coming from? Trying to analyze it into oblivion, which like totally didn't work out. And then of course I get this perspective, and then it's like poof, oops, it's not there. And the funniest thing was that 3 days later, I got this huge email from a man who really treated me very, very badly in the past. And, they say if you're waiting for an apology, you better, just let go, because it's like less than 1% of people that somebody will go to you and say, yeah, I apologize. This was wrong. And I didn't need the apology at that time. Like I was totally at peace within me with this person, with the past and everything. But when he sent me that letter of apology, I just knew that it was like the medicine telling me, you did a good job doing this, we're letting it go. And now here for the letter, I didn't need the letter anymore. I was okay. I don't think I would have ever gotten a letter, if I don't do this work, but it was just so amazing, so powerful. And a big part of the work that I do, the integration work with people, is helping them to let go, give themselves permission to feel and let go of the suppressed emotion, which is already a big work because you have to allow yourself, and you are conditioned to not to feel it and to judge it that this is something bad. So you have to work through that conditioning and have to have people to feel it and empty these emotions. And I think that's something that the medicine helps us with, because after the ceremony, first everybody is blissful, and then all the emotions come out. We just call it the emotional roller coaster. And then you have to learn new behavior, not to suppress it anymore, not to how to gonna roll with it, right? And that's such a huge part. So like, do you have some favorite tool or understanding or practice or something that you do in your life or help with your clients with, in terms of emotional health and healthy expression emotionally?
Oh gosh, yes, absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, is a commitment to being in the space of being. In other words, feeling our emotions. Ayahuasca has an expression. She calls this balance, the do be dance. We want to do and be and do and be, but most of us are do, and we only get to a space of beingness when stuff happens, when we have no choice because the volcano is erupting or the grief is overwhelming. So the first step is the commitment, whatever that looks like: traditional meditation, walks in nature, intentionally taking a bath and letting emotions come up. I mean, for example, I start every day by sitting at my altar and just asking the question, how you feeling, kiddo? How you doing today? Like, so that I put my awareness in that place of how am I feeling? Because sometimes I don't even, know until something happens, like most of us. So being intentional about that. And then from there, there's all kinds of different tools just based on what we need around how to allow anger, grief, guilt, shame, all of it come forth. And those are all my favorite to work with, because underneath them is the juicy stuff that we're trying to get to. You want more joy, you got to feel these things, right? Like I've tried to find the way around really desperately. It doesn't exist. It's through. So finding somatic tools as an example, if we need to feel safe in our bodies. The medicine Wachuma, San Pedro cactus that I work with, is he's taught me how to feel my emotions because it's safe to do so. So having allies that can just teach us, it's that the emotions don't want to hurt us. They just want to be felt, but we don't necessarily know that until we get to have some experiences of just sitting and feeling and processing. And then I find that becomes like a gift in itself. Momentum starts to build because we start to realize, wait a second, this isn't that my emotions aren't the enemy. And when I sit with them and I feel them and I have let myself, like for example, when I work with anger, I work with the fire. I'll have a fire pit, just scream into the fire and write things and burn it. Gosh, that feels good. It's like space is created. So it starts to build on itself, but there's so many ways that we can start to learn that it is safe to feel. And we each have a different sort of benchmark around what that safety, how that comes in. But the good news is there's a lot of smart people like you out there that are helping people find these tools, but we just got to be committed to actually feeling our emotions. The only way to get to higher states of consciousness.
Thank you so much. I had this idea about this because, when the holistic model started to come into the West, they call this body, body, mind, spirit. And my system was always it was body, mind, heart, spirit. So for me, there was always like as a separate, the emotional aspect with the heart center was a separate aspect. Well, not separate, obviously, but, a distinctive aspect. And I was always wondering where there was that model, that why they left out the heart, like body, mind, spirit, okay, whatever. And then, working with the medicine really taught me that the heart is the gateway to our higher self, to our spirit, to our higher aspects. And that's why it's so important what you're talking about, to do this emotional healing work, to clear that gateway where we can, go and elevate ourselves, into higher realms. And I think that I always thought that leaving it out from that, the body, mind, spirit complex, it's a little bit kind of deceptive to people. Say, I don't worry about that. That's not important. The whole Western world, the Western medicine, and puts down emotions and the heart and everything. And, the indigenous and the spiritual tradition very much so emphasize, that's your most important, part. So I love, what you're saying about this. But all of this, that what we are talking about is like deep work. It's work that takes time. It's a work that I believe it's almost impossible to do alone, or it would take a long time and suffering based on a trial and error experience. So like, who is qualified to do plant medicine work? And I'm talking about not just serving medicine in a ceremonial setting, but also helping people, before and after in a container. And what do you think, based on your experience? And now it's getting so popular in the West, and there's the wide legalization. And I'm often laughing with my colleagues that in 10 years, everybody is going to be a psychedelic integration coach, like how it was with the yoga teachers, And so how do you see this unfolding?
Well, it's a bit messy, as this kind of rapid growth always is, because one of the complexities around what you just asked is, how do we know somebody is qualified? It is not about academic qualifications, which the Western world holds as the pinnacle of like, look, I have my diplomas, I am certified, I have graduated. That doesn't mean anything in the context of the work that you're describing, because it's experiential. And basically most of us, we learn to help others because we've done it for ourselves, or we are still doing it, actually more accurately in the present tense. But it has to be credible in that sense, that we know what shadow work feels like, that we know what the death and rebirth process feels like, that it's been something we've experienced time and time again before we feel like, okay, now I'm equipped to just guide others, because we don't do it for other people either. I don't know how it came to be that there was a point where ayahuasca said, okay, now you can help others. And I remember sitting 15 years ago saying, I'm going to help people integrate psychedelic experiences. And this was unheard of. My husband at the time was like, yeah, someone's going to pay you for that. Right. I'm like, it's needed. I'm going to do this. And now it's the, next yoga teacher thing. Like you said, it's like, wow, because it is needed. But so many people are stepping forth as a distraction from their own healing. And it shows. It's messy, because even if you've got good intentions, you really want to help. If you haven't cracked the code yourself, you're causing more harm than good. You're actually spreading more of the fear and the confusion rather than the genuine experience of this place of healing and love. So it's different for all of us in terms of how long that takes. And it's a very personal piece of integrity. But you can't just take a course and get certified and say, look, I can do this now. Or it's not, that's not how this works. It has to be legitimately authentic. And so it's up to all of us that seek out people that help us, that we are discerning, that we make sure like, wow, this person practices what they preach. I want what they have, not what they're talking about, but what they exude energetically. That's what we're looking for. And, not everybody has that right now stepping forward. It's too young in the rebirth of this industry for this many people to say that they're ready to do this.
Yes. That's such a big topic. Maybe another time we can dive into this, what's happening in the psychedelic healing space at the moment. But I totally agree with you that the most important characteristic, if you want to work with somebody, is their personal experience and the work that they did, in their own healing work. So, and I think it's also important that people who are offering services, we are transparent with that, with our background and what we've been through and where we're coming from, so people can, discern for themselves. And also, I find that obviously there is legalization coming down from the top, but also there is this grassroots movements that's coming from the community that we want, to have standards, we want to have ways ways of, doing these things. And your website that we're going to share is a great resource for people to go and educate themselves about, in your book, you give questions of what somebody should ask of a person, a retreat center or whatever, if they never been, to try to discern, is this a safe place or not a safe place, and how professional these people are. On my website, people can find code of ethics and standard of practice for ayahuasca professionals, people who work with this particular medicine. And so we need to educate ourselves. People need to educate themselves, because it's your responsibility, because it's a little bit the wild, wild west now, as you said. But it's gonna be, unfold and cleared out for sure. And it's great, that you are out there also offering all these resources like the book, and those questions that people really can take away. So I'm grateful for that. What would be something that you want to shout out to people, before we finish off for today, that you would like, that if somebody is interested in working with sacred plants in a responsible way for healing and awakening, what is the most important thing you want them to know before they start on their journey?
Oh, goodness. Well, that it's available. It really is available for everyone. Now, not all plants are available for everyone. They all have a different protocol of safety. Ayahuasca happens to be one of the stricter ones, just in terms of prerequisites, right? But I really feel like we're healing a core wound of being disconnected to nature right now. And so anybody that feels called to connect with plant consciousness, there is a plant out there that can rock your world in the most beautiful way. It may not be ayahuasca. It may not even be a psychedelic plant. That's okay. There are so many aspects of the plant kingdom that are there to help us heal and remember who we are. And so I just want to say, they're waiting for all of us to connect with them, because that they love it too. We're nature. We've just felt like we're separate from it. And I just think it's so beautiful that so many people are called, because it's a core thing around healing our entire planet, not just us as individuals, is that we reconnect with the plant kingdom, the animal kingdom, and realize we're a part of it. And they just want to help.
So beautiful. And yeah, don't be afraid of the plants. A lot of people are freaked out, especially psychedelic plants, sacred plants. We don't need to be afraid, but we need to be informed, right? We need to be
Beautifully said.
informed.
Yeah.
Do our best to stay safe and to be responsible, but definitely it's something that is, part of our experience, and we are deeply connected with the plants and with the nature, on a deeper level. Well, thank you so much for coming. Like, people can go to your website, plantmedicinepeople.com, for more information. We're going to share it also in the description, and join your community, work with you, even in the containers, with ceremonial containers, or you do integration as well. You have different offerings. Yeah, if people want to work with me with the ayahuasca, with the 15 months long deep dive container, like, just go to my website. And if you are interested, to start a career and support others, also just look at our website and have more information, and let us know what you think. And if you have any questions, any topics that you want us to talk about, leave a comment, and stay tuned for our next episode. So thank you, Kat, for being here today.
Thank you, Nina. Such a pleasure.
Thank you for listening, and leave a comment if you enjoyed this episode. Help us grow our community by sharing this episode with your friends, and subscribe to our channel to receive the latest on ayahuasca-assisted therapy. To embark on your healing journey, or to start a new career in psychedelic-assisted therapy, go to my website, avatarhealingarts.com, and get in touch. And of course, stay tuned for the next episode.